Hey, and thanks very much for joining me. I'm Dean, this is Woodwork Journey, and today we're going to be hopefully doing something with this here door. Sorry if you can hear the 3D printer in the background, that's going ballistic at the moment, but this is a normal kind of shed door, and it's just really poorly made. It's rotten as you like. It's not going to do the trick. And on the other side of that shed door, what I've got is my Evolution gazebo at the moment. However, that's not going to be up for much longer, so this needs changing. Now, I think I might have to replace this at some point, the door frame, and the brickwork is certainly not very good, but for the moment what I'm going to do is just try and work on making the door. Now, I haven't got the time or the wood to make it from scratch, so what I'm going to try and do is use this big bad boy, which is actually, I think it's been used as an external door, but I'm not entirely sure, but it's not in great shape. It's sort of expanded in areas that it shouldn't have done, so we've got kind of expansion going on up there. We've got various holes from the locks and things that have been used on it over the years, and we've got quite the split going on down the bottom here as well. So what my intention is to get all of the finish off of it. Once the finish is off it, then I can see if I've got to take out any of the wood or if I can glue and clamp it and all that sort of stuff. I'm going to remove all the glass from there so I can reuse that or put it in properly. And yeah, I'm going to have to clamp up the split in there as well, of course. And yeah, we're going to see how that goes. Now, the thing is, I could have bought some 6x2s or whatever and made it all from scratch, but I really don't like seeing wood go to waste. If I can do something that helps reduce a landfill, then great. If this doesn't work, I'll be building a door from scratch anyway. But yeah, for the time being, I'm hoping I'm just going to be able to trim off the sides, get it to fit, and then I'll be able to kind of just use it for the short term, bang a lock in there, use it for the short term, and then if I want to redo that whole area, then I certainly can do that later down the line. But let's get into stripping this bad boy and seeing what we've got to work with. As you can see, I'm still using my JCB tools and they're all going pretty much swimmingly. However, if you want a long-term review, do leave a comment down below and I'll let you know how I've got on with them. Now, when it came to taking this plate off, I didn't really understand how things work, so at this point I was deeply confused that I couldn't pull the lock out. And then I realised that plate came off and there were two more screws underneath it. So they came out and the whole thing managed to come to bits, which is lovely. Now then, clearing up the door, getting rid of spiders' nests and webs and muck and filth and all that sort of stuff led me to getting the putty out of the glass. Now, the idea was, because I would absolutely break all of the glass, was to sort of gently go around them with a hammer and chisel and get rid of that glass, which I managed to do mostly in one piece, which I was pretty pleased with. That hammer that I'm using actually has a leather face on one side and a copper face on the other. It's an old one that got picked up with a load of second-hand old gear, I think, and it's actually been an absolute beast to have in the workshop for sort of more delicate things. So fully suggest getting one if you find one floating around. I recorded this video before I did my Evolution saw and track review, so that censored area is blocking the Evolution saw out of sight. Anyway, still using my Smurdex pads from eBrasives as well. I think they are absolutely fantastic. If you want to find out any more about those, then check out the description box down below. Still using my old Menza sander that I reviewed absolutely yonks ago. Recently changed the pad on it, and that has worked out really nicely. Now, right here, I'm using a brand new mask from Basecamp. I've got a couple of masks to review from them, and if you've got any experience with the Basecamp stuff, do let me know. But it's actually, they did a change to it, and I'll explain more in the video. Now, this Smurdex paper that I'm using, or mesh that I'm using rather, was 100 grit, and I thought, do you know what, I'm going to actually have a go at using my old Stanley scraper so I don't go through too many pads, although they're extremely useful. And that's exactly what I did. As you can see, I sort of moved the scraper around It needed a little bit of setting up from the last time I used it, so I was kind of stopping and starting. But that scraper managed to get rid of a large portion of the rubbish over the top of the frame, and then I just followed up with the sander afterwards. I picked up some Rustin's Strip It from my local small DIY shop, and to be fair, it didn't do a bad job. It's not as bad as some of the sort of stripping stuff that you get these days, and it did make a lot of the finish bubble up and all that sort of stuff. Unfortunately, on this particular day, I was in too much pain to carry on, so I had to go back with a wire wheel, as you'll see in a minute. The door had swollen previously, so I did have to clamp and glue it together, and we'll see how successful that is, because I think my tight bond had gone off. But the top was all clamped up, as you can see there, and that isn't too bad. I still do some extra filling later on, and closed up that gap with more clamping and gluing overnight. Made sure that I had my base camp mask on and glasses, because this is how I got rid of the rest of the paint and varnish and whatever it was in the middle there. And that was using this wire wheel. Now you can see it's a little bit furry there, and that's because the stripper had done a really good job getting really into the wood. But yeah, it was just going to take too long. So this is the next day or a couple of days later where I had to go back at it, and everything had pretty much dried up. So I just had at it with the wire wheel, and it did a surprisingly decent job. And didn't take that long, surprisingly. So that was the dark side of the door done. This is the lighter side of the door, and I thought I'd just have at it with the sander this time. I set this on I think a 7 out of 9, just because it's easier, it's less vibrations, and it's still got quite a low centre of gravity. So I'm really impressed with this sander. They're still not cheap, but it's certainly not Merca money. And you can see that the mix of this sander as well as the Smurdex 100 grit is working out really, really nicely, and just doesn't take much effort at all. I mentioned earlier that I'd glued up this and clamped it overnight, but there were still these tiny gaps going on, so I used the old woodworker trick of glue and sawdust. So I'm still using this tight bond glue that I think is a bit too watery, but we'll see how it goes over time. I'm just making sure that I really get it in that little crack right there and push it down, and then it's a case of getting your sander, turning the dust collection off, and so when it's sanding around, it's creating plenty of this dust. I'm still wearing a mask, and that dust is going to just kind of get into that glue hole and cover things up nicely. It's not a perfect finish, it never is, but yeah, I thought it was worth a go on this one. And then for some of the other holes and bits and bobs, I thought I'd try out some of I think this is Everbuild wood filler, this stuff. Can't remember if it takes a stain or not, but there were lots of little holes from having things like locks and stuff put on the door over the years, and so I thought I'd just go over it. Now this hole that I'm doing here is obviously far too big to be using to filler in this kind of way. I should really have cut the internals out and then sort of put a block in there, but I might use that hole again for putting the next lock on it. I don't know, I haven't bought a lock or got a lock to go on there yet. So yeah, basically it's just I'm using this stuff to fill up a bunch of holes. The keyhole thing there, I do cover it eventually, but it's not meant to cover that kind of big lump of stuff. That being said, I think this stuff is pretty cheap on Amazon. I think that's where I got it from a while ago, and it seems to do a fine job. It's a bit on the light side, but you know, does a grand job. Then it's a case of making sure that we can get as much dust off it as we can, then clearing up all of the bits of filler that I've just put in. And then I went over it with some boiled linseed oil. Now the reason I've done this, I've got no awareness. Oh, and here's Captain Cripple Hands trying to get into it. The reason I've done this is because this is an old door, and there were various shades of this kind of wood, probably because it was covered over with other stuff for however many years. But I thought that the boiled linseed oil might feed the wood again, so where it's been dried out and cracked and split over the years, I thought this might give some of its kind of stuff back to it, you know. And you can see that as I'm doing it, it really does make quite the difference. And yeah, I do look like I'm doing it aggressively there, but that's just because my hand isn't holding onto a paintbrush very well. Okay, so right at this moment in time, the door has been linseed oiled, boiled linseed oiled, had a couple of coats of that on it. It's had a night or so to dry. I've then come out and actually had 2 nights to dry, and then I came out and I've just wiped it all down to get rid of anything excess. I've now put it outside because it's nice out there, and so hopefully that'll dry off a little bit more. Now, I'm not going to fully waterproof seal it yet because I am going to have to cut some of it off, and then I'm going to have to waterproof those bits as well. So we're going to move on to the frame. However, the frame is problematic because while, you know, in fact, let me just grab the camera and I can show you on Handycam. Right, so as we come across to this door, we can see that this has obviously been, whoops, where's the camera? It's been spliced at some point in time because of rot, and right down the bottom there, that's not too clever, and sort of same kind of thing going on over this side. And once again, aspects of it have been spliced in at some point. So, you know, that's not looking too clever on the inside. But if we look on the outside, it's even worse. And this, we've still got the Evolution gazebo over us. This is the damp and the state that we've got of this wood on the outside, and it is not in great shape, as you can tell. So that is probably a soft wood that's just been left untreated for years and is looking very ropey and very rotten. And, you know, similarly on the other side, if I close this kind of attempt at a door, we can see that as we move down, we've got holes in it and all sorts of things. At this point, that's where you simply say, right, we'll just replace the door frame, Dean. How hard can it be? It's just bits of wood. And I do have to replace the inner sill anyway because the new door is thicker than the old, you know, single bit of wood thickness. But let me show you why replacing the whole thing could be problematic. And that is because this brickwork up along here needs repointing. And so this is not very clever at all. And in fact, if I can get the angle just right, you might even be able to see daylight through that sort of gap. Not quite. But yeah, it's not in great shape. And so if I were to remove this, I think that there would be quite a realistic opportunity that this whole thing would come crashing down to the floor, which is not ideal. There, you see, that's not promising at all. So I'm going to have to see if I've got any concrete that I can cement that in with, but yeah, maybe I could put, I do have a couple of these acro props, which actually, thinking about it, is not a terrible idea to have them holding up the top beam so I can then take away the side beams and redo them. That's not an awful idea. I think I'm going to go for that. And here we are. So this is a few days later. Unfortunately, the health has not been great, but what I've done is I've gone and bought 3 lengths of 2x4, 4x2 from Wix, and it's pretty straight, it's treated, so I'll be using that for the door frame. Now, ironically, I could have bought that and used it to make the door, but well, let's gloss over that. The door I'm quite happy with. It's by no means perfect, but it'll do for the workshop door. Now, what I have got is some outdoor wood stain, some Rustin's stuff, and this is a dark oak, so I'm hoping that once I have finished the door entirely, I can then pop this over it, and that will allow it to sort of even itself up a little bit, I think, because I think they use different kind of hues to the wood, maybe because it was supposed to be a painted door or something like that, and so you wouldn't see it. But yeah, some of the wood is actually different colours, so that's why I'm going to use this wood stain, and I can also stick the wood stain over all of the 4x2 frame as well. Now then, I've also bought, while I was in Wix, I picked up a tub of mixed in the tub mortar so I can repoint the brickwork above the doorway, and that'll be something that, well, tell me, do you want to see the repointing for some reason? I mean, essentially it's chipping out concrete mortar and then replacing it with this stuff, but if you want to see it, please do let me know. Otherwise, it'll be building the door frame in the next video to do with the door, and away we go. Incidentally, while I was at Wix, this Hippo Universal wood glue, which is like the one of these sort of poly, whatever they are, glues, seem to be quite a decent price. I've not used it yet, but if you've used it, then let me know. But it seems like it might be an alternative to the sort of the expanding Gorilla Glue and all that sort of nonsense. So, I mean, it's Hippo, so we're still in the animal family. If you're interested, by the way, about what I've been printing while I've been filming, is this. This is a cyclone, because I'll be building a couple of different cyclones to see which is best. Now then, the next videos that'll be coming out, I don't know if my health is going to allow me to get stuck into the pointing or not, but my plan is to do that, then leave it a couple of days to sort of sort itself out and dry properly and all that, and then I'll build the frame. Obviously I'll film the frame, but if you want me to film the pointing as well, then crack on. But because of the amount of time out here that they demand, they might not be the next videos that are coming out. The next videos that are coming out might be a couple of reviews. I've got a Vevor mitre gauge to do a review of. I've got the 3D printer. I've got a few bits and bobs. Even got the dust mask that I used in this video as well. So I've got a few reviews to show you. And so because they're easier to film on my part, then I might put those out before getting back into the door work. So anyway, that's where we're up to. Thank you very much for sticking with me. The dog's barking outside again, and I'll see you very, very soon. Bye bye.